Hi, I'm Dave Wood from Automatic Irrigation Supply. We're going to check and go through a process of when a valve won't close on a sprinkler system. And today we're going to use a DV valve, which is the most common valve that we sell and probably out in the market today on residential systems. So you arrive at your residential system and your customer has told you there's a zone running in the back and the clock is showing that it's off. So the first thing you really need to do is go to the clock with your voltmeter. And you go to your clock and make sure obviously that the clock is running and there's no strange notifications on the faceplate. And then you open and you go to the inside with your voltmeter, put it on DC to check for your voltage. And what you're going to do is go to find out which zone is up and running, and you're going to put your probe on the common, then go to that zone and check for voltage. If there's voltage on that zone and it says 27 or 28 volts, I would also go through the rest of the zones and check and see if there's any other voltage on the other terminal blocks. If you do have voltage on the zone and the clock is showing that it is in the off position, that means there's something wrong with the clock and the zone out in the field is getting feed through on the voltage on that terminal block. And it's an electronic problem and it stops at the clock. If there's no voltage at the clock on that zone, we've pretty much narrowed down that the problem is out in the field. While you're there also, I would also do an ohms test on this particular device. And what I'm going to do is turn it to ohms on my voltmeter once again. It'll probably be 20 for you. On mine it's automatic. And I am going to test the white common in that particular zone, and I'm reading 43. While I'm at it, I would probably test all of the zones. It takes you like 30 seconds to go through each one and check each terminal block to see that they're all reading in that 20 to 60 range. It's going to vary a little bit across the board depending on how old the system is. But if it does read 43 and that zone is still on, that means the wire path to that particular zone is on, good. So what we're going to do is go to the valve box and say it's on, it's still on. There's multiple things that could be wrong here. And oddly enough, one of them could be if it's a new system and you're turning it on for the very first time. A valve put in backwards, meaning the arrow is going in the wrong way on the valve, it will keep the water from going through it on the first time when it's charged up and pressurized. But the second you turn on this particular valve electrically or manually, it will not go back down. So if you're on a new job site, that is a problem. I mean, I've done it, everybody's done it on new installs. It will happen. I mean, sometime in your career you're going to feel awfully foolish, but that could be potentially a problem. Could be that the customer's been out there and has replaced the valve and has put it in backwards also. Most valves, the solenoid is downstream. So let's say that's not the issue and it's still not going down. You can use the flush valve, the flush nut on top, to flush the top and open it and close it and see if there's any debris that you can swish around and make sure that it's not debris on top of it, allowing the flow to get into the top of the diaphragm. What is closing the diaphragm or closing this valve is water moving on top of the diaphragm and pushing it down. The thing that we need to do at this point in time, if it's still not shutting down, we need to turn off the water, and then we need to go back to the valve, and we need to take the top of the valve off. And we need to look at the valve and inspect it, take off this top spring, put it someplace where you won't lose it, and then you're going to take the diaphragm off. The thing that allows the water to go in on top of the diaphragm, to push the diaphragm down, to shut down the valve, is called a little tick valve. And this little tick valve has little screening on it and water enters in both sides of this tick valve to go in on top of the diaphragm to keep it shut. It has to have that to shut it down. So it has to have water incoming to go on top of this diaphragm to push it down. The other thing that may not be allowing it to shut down is that in your solenoid area, your solenoid is allowing water to push through downstream and keeping everything open. So what happens sometimes is that, not so much on the Rainbird products because their solenoid is really filtered, but there's a steel plunger in there going up and down. So what happens sometimes on some other product lines, or occasionally Rainbird will have the same issue, but in that plunger, it's set inside a cylinder. If grit gets in there and the plunger gets sucked up, and it sticks. And so when the controller is telling it it's time to stop, the plunger is supposed to fall and shut down so water can gather on top of the diaphragm and shut down the process. But what's happening, the last thing I would look at would be this. It is a possibility that the plunger is not falling and keeping the water to flow through and keeping the valve open. So those are things today that we can go through to check real quick to make sure that what might be the problem with a valve staying in the open position.